expert on the rules.
Does somebody have a copy of Robert's rules?
That's what we need, yeah.
I used to go to standards meetings where there were engineers who prided themselves in front to back.
Yep. Sorry, I was late. Traffic right on the bridge. Stopped and going a while, but
Which bridge? The Warren Bridge?
getting on the, Warren. Almost been an accident, I never saw it, but it was, and it broke up.
One across the board and then all around Santa Fe.
Not until like that, Austin, which was Austin. For like 6 more.
Okay, we're all here, right? I'm gonna call this meeting back to regular order. The December 6, 2023 meeting of the Harwich Conservation Commission in the Don Griffin Room in Town Hall. This is once again, it's a hybrid meeting. Participation in person or through GoToMeeting is possible. For instructions to participate through GoToMeeting, please see the agenda posted on the Town of Harwich website. We are going to start with Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So the first item on the agenda tonight is a notice of intent for Off Dunes Road, map 5, parcel Y1, SE 32-2545, continued from, I think it's 11/16 actually.
Yeah. 11/16. And Mr. Chair, sorry, but you have to say that during executive session, what you voted
I'm
upon
sorry, I did
previously.
left that little bit out. Yes, during executive session, the commission voted 401 to support the memorandum of understanding being established between the town of Harwich and the school.
For 374 Main Street.
For 374 Main Street, thank you. There,
Good
you
evening.
have the floor.
Arlene Wilson, A.M. Wilson Associates, here for the Allens Harbor Beach Club. And to recap briefly, the project is to reconstruct and maintain the westerly access to the Allens Harbor Beach Association beach. The access and beach service about 67 families. The upgrade includes widening of the boardwalk surface from 30 inches to 48 inches and extending the surface with seasonally installed matting to make it accessible for handicap purposes. The hearing was continued primarily because we had not yet heard from Mass Natural Heritage, whose letter came in the day after. But they've reviewed the original plan and had no significant objections. They've requested their standard time of year restrictions for plovers because the beach area is mapped for plovers. There were also some concerns about the need for vegetative mitigation, and about the seasonal 5x10 mat area where that we had proposed so that people could leave shoes and coolers and walkers and other things that they might otherwise sort of ramble around the dune and the dune vegetation, hoping that it would limit the intrusion and the damage into the dunes. So after the discussions with Mass Natural Heritage, we, and in some verbal discussions as well as a follow-up memo, Amy Honig, who is in charge of the bird program there, suggested that if the commission absolutely insisted on having vegetative mitigation, that we probably could do it, and she would like to see any plan that that was proposed. The Department of Natural Heritage generally prefers not planting any additional vegetation where there's plover habitat. Then we had also requested variances for the access design. Originally, the matting at the end of the path was proposed at 5 feet wide, and the boardwalk is flat to grade instead of being propped up with a space underneath it. And there are no stairs on the bank. It is also flat to grade on the bank. The variance we would hope, would extend to the mitigation requirement because the project is predominantly for handicapped access purposes. However, in discussions with your agent, we did provide a revised calculation so of the increase in hardscape and what that would mean should the board decide that they wanted vegetative mitigation. It would result in something between 1,760 square feet and a little more than 2,000, including that 5x10 area where the matting is installed. Amy and I also had a back and forth about in lieu fee and what the in lieu fee might be if that were an option. Clearly, this is a difficult planting situation. American beach grass is fine. That could be installed. It doesn't require water. But shrubby vegetation in that kind of environment really needs to be watered for the first couple of seasons. And the association, of course, has no water source there. So I would be concerned about the requirement to plant particularly woody vegetation across that area for fear that it would not survive, unlike American beach grass or some other herbaceous materials. Again, I think, and we did provide a revised plan to narrow the matting at the end of the boardwalk from 5 feet to 4 feet, which is your standard path width in your regulations. So on behalf of the association, I would beg your indulgence for variance, but we'll deal with what the board decides they would like to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. In addition to what Arlene detailed from the Natural Heritage letter, they also said that if we were to permit the project, that we would have to prohibit installation between April 1st and August 31st annually, because of the piping plovers. This is predominantly for the primary frontal dune area, I would assume. They would also need to hire a qualified shorebird monitor. Even though you haven't had plovers there in recent history, it is decent habitat. I've been surprised that plovers haven't wanted to be there, to be honest, over the past years. I think partially it's because it is a little bit of a steep profile, the beach, and they do prefer a longer, flatter beach like we have at Bank Street or Red River. But it's still pretty decent habitat there. So I wouldn't be surprised if plovers, especially now that the population is growing, to take up residence there. So they would need to hire a person ahead of the season, and that would be somebody, some Audubon or the like, who would look at that starting April 1st to see if you did have any state-listed species there. So I like most of the changes to the plan, only going to 4 feet wide and not 5. That's consistent with our regulations in terms of width of pathways. And I appreciate the wanting to be more compliant and having a sturdier base for some of the people in your association. This is a fairly large association. Had this been for like a private homeowner, I would be a little more hesitant for allowing such a long structure through a resource area. The most dynamic part of this resource is that primary frontal dune, however, and behind that primary frontal dune, probably for a length of 150-ish feet, it is dune, it's dune vegetation, it's dune sediment, but it's not moving as much as just that primary frontal dune is. So I think they already have a 2.5 foot wide structure, which you permitted years ago. They're asking to go 1.5 foot wider for it, essentially put the new 4 foot wide structure over what's on grade right now. And I don't foresee that, because it is fairly stable in the back dune there, having a big impact on any lateral or movement of the dune or vegetative cover, because there's already a little bit of foot traffic on either side that's happening, which wouldn't happen once we made it wider. I'm still not in favor of the 5x10 Moby mat for purposes of putting coolers and shoes and whatnot. People are currently putting them in the sand, and I can understand your logic wanting to get them off that, but I still think people are going to continue to do that. And it's approaching that primary frontal dune where you do get some sand movement. So I would suggest against allowing that 5x10 section in that location, or period. It's additional to the pathway, and the pathway I can rationalize, but I can't with the 5x10 section, as it could alter form and function. I would be much more in favor of the mitigation planting than the in lieu fees. In lieu fees should only be assessed if there is no other option on the property. And this is a pretty big property that the association has. It extends all the way to the jetty and through the dune fields. So I think it would be fairly easy to find the 1760 to 2,000-ish square feet of area somewhere in there. And I understand your concern about the woody vegetation. I think a majority of that could be American beach grass, which doesn't need much. There are some areas where people who have waterfront access or who have access through that have maybe expanded their areas a little bit more than just a path, so those areas could be discussed for replanting. And they're more in the back dune area where natural heritage is not going to be as concerned about it as they were. It's in the frontal dune. So I'm confident that I could work with you to come up with plenty of room and locations for some plantings, and I do believe it should be done on site, because I think it can be. So with that condition, and I think it's going to be a hard thing for them to come up with a dedicated planting plan, because it's going to be a little bit here, a little bit there. it would have to be something that I would approve and of course show you. But I would be in favor of the project and recommend approval with that condition, that they work with me to come up with locations for the plantings, but without the 5x10 mat adjacent to the path.
Okay, thank you. So, Commissioners, Mark,
I have no remarks, thank you.
Jim?
Well, I agree with Amy's comments, but I think before I would be comfortable voting, I think it would be helpful if they could work with Amy to come up with a mitigation plan.
All set. Brad?
I think that's my remark as well, is that I don't think we're there yet for a
Right.
mitigation plan to go one way or the other on the project.
I agree with Amy's suggestions.
Okay, I'm with Amy too, and I don't have any further comments myself. Any other comments from the commission? So what's been suggested is that we continue and we get an explicit mitigation plan.
I would hope that, considering the nature of the area, you would vote to approve the project subject to mitigation being worked out with your agent, and we can maybe do that on an aerial photograph, is probably the easiest way to do it. And instead of trying to get a planting plan, and we've given Amy a discussion of how that would work based on our experience with these things in natural heritage areas. We've suggested clumps, 2 clumps of beach grass to a hole 2 feet on center. And I've also suggested that if we can wrestle up some beach pea seed, that we put some of that in the holes as well, because it's a nitrogen fixer and it will help to stimulate the initial growth of the beach grass. But
It's the commission's purview. It wouldn't be a traditional planting plan in that the scale, this property is so huge, you wouldn't get a plan of the whole area. So it would have to be something like an aerial showing areas, most likely. Otherwise, it would be extremely time consuming and expensive to have to survey everything. So you could certainly see the plan, like you could condition it that, you know, we work out the plan, you see it, and that work cannot start until you've been okay with it. It's a little non-traditional, and I understand that.
Place, not until, well, it can't take place after April 1, is that
No
correct?
structures can take place, can
Okay.
be put in after April 1. American beach grass does best when you plant it in the winter time, when it's dormant.
I see.
So it could be done this winter.
beach grass ought to be planted before the 1st of April or
Right.
after the beginning of October anyway. You
Right.
don't want to plant
I
it
see.
in the heat of the summer.
It goes
And-
dormant, and,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, you have to plant it in pots, and you have the same problem as if you were planting perennials in the beach.
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
So, 2 commissioners suggested they were not comfortable with proceeding at this point. Do you care to discuss that any further? I don't,
I usually like to see the plan, but I think I can, go with Amy's recommendation and confidence that you're heading in the right direction.
And I'll show it to you. It wouldn't proceed, if you voted to approve, we could condition it that the project cannot proceed with the installation until there's agreement.
Right.
Can come back as a discussion item.
And further, haven't we discussed conditions anything additionally that we would want to consider to put on this if you were to vote tonight?
I don't think anything that wasn't discussed during the meeting. Certainly the heritage conditions, the timing.
And agreeing with your take, also not including approval for the 5x10 Moby mat.
That's my recommendation. You can decide otherwise.
I agree with that as well.
I agree with that as well. And again, I think there are so many conditions that I would prefer that we continue this hearing and come back, it can be as soon as possible. It could be our next meeting with whatever type of plan, whatever is appropriate to show us where the mitigation plantings would go, whether it's on an aerial, whether it's on a plan, or whatever works. And that it be something that you've reviewed with Amy and that Amy's comfortable with.
I just say unfortunately, I won't have time in the next week to dedicate to going out there and working on that. I apologize, but this next week is crazy.
What we've got, and I think we emailed you, is an aerial photograph, which is what the existing conditions plan is on. And what we would just do is take some of the areas that are naked on the aerial and just circle them and say boom grass planting here. I mean, this is not going to be a landscape architect's planting plan because the area is too big and there's going to be a little bit of shifting, I'm sure, when we go out to actually do the planting so that we avoid things that are already growing that might not show up on the aerial.
And also dunes do tend to naturally have bare spots due to wind patterns and things like that. So I would say you can't just look at an image and see where it's bare, other than where it might be bare due to people adjacent to paths or something like that. But sometimes you have to look on site and see where it's actually going to work, because sometimes vegetation is not growing there for a reason. That has nothing to do with people.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with approving it as long as we can see the plan, see the photo. And if they can't do any work until we do that, I think that's reasonable.
I would agree with that. I think that would be appropriate.
So we can move forward if someone makes a motion.
Never done it before.
And I would move to grant approval with the pending plan submission, I guess. would be the way to
On
say
the
it.
condition that the applicant work with the conservation administrator to come up with a plan,
Yes.
and that the conditions provided by Natural Heritage are part of the order of conditions, and that the Moby mat not be approved. Does that cover it? Is
that
that your
Mark's?
motion?
Yeah, that would
Okay.
cover pretty well, I think.
Specify the area of mitigation, include that, please.
The plans would show that, yeah.
Plan-
No, he
plan will
he
show
wants a
the plan.
number.
Yeah, we accepted the 1176.
I think it should, personally, we don't have a second yet. We shouldn't be discussing this yet.
Second.
Right.
So it's a fairly, this is a big ask. I understand that it's for, access purposes, and it's for a larger association, but this is a pretty big ask for a permanent structure through a very dynamic system. So I would go on the higher side at the 2,036 square feet.
So do you want to amend your motion to include 2,036 square feet of coverage.
I believe so.
That 2,036 square feet would include the mitigation necessary for that 5 by 10
Oh.
area that you don't want to have.
Okay, sorry about that.
So I think we're really at
So
about
1760.
1,800.
1836, right? That's 20.
Yes, you're correct. If we're gonna talk about exact numbers, yep, you're right, 1836, okay?
Yes.
Seconded.
Okay, further discussion. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, 4 and 1.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is a notice of intent for 9 and 11 Herring Run, map 3, parcels X3-2 and X3-3, SE 32-2546. Continued from 11/1, is that correct?
That was the original date
Okay, all right.
that we opened it.
Who will be speaking on this? Is that Mr. Monroe there?
John will be joining, but good evening. My name is Cole Bateman. I'm a project manager with Coastal Engineering Company.
Okay.
Also joining our presentation here is Michelle Hunn from Rudman, Don Monroe from Coastal Engineering, Paul Mancuso from BSC Group, and then in the audience is Lindsay Strode, and we're representing the applicants, Dan Corey and Dave Mogan, for their shared dock application here on the Herring River. This project has been previously presented to the commission, and tonight we're coming back with some additional information. Primarily, it's some mitigation information followed by some responses to DMF, the commission's questions, as well as some other things. So perhaps we can start, please, with the mitigation plan, and I'll share my screen, and Lindsay could take it from there.
Good evening. Lindsay Strode with Cape Organics for the applicant. I've had the opportunity to be on this property a number of times as we develop the plan, the mitigation plan. One of the things that's kind of exciting for a plant person is the fact that we have two properties that can be considered one, somewhat contiguous. The neat part of it is when you stand at the marsh and look back at the property, you can we're looking to create a corridor, a buffer and a corridor. So there's two interests there that I think are, again, exciting, if you will. Present conditions at 9 River Run, again, you folks have been out there, I'm assuming, several times, or at least once. It's a relatively conventionally managed property. There was some previous mitigation done for some permitted expansion. One of the things we're going to do is utilize that and kind of expand on that. Now, I'm referring primarily, exclusively to the areas on the east side, or the river side of the property. Present conditions on 11 River Run is what we might consider a less managed or Cape Cod lawn area. There isn't much there from the managed landscape aspect. But if you look a little bit closer, there's a number of kind of cool things that have just been mown, just for maintenance purposes, which we're going to, illustrate why we shouldn't be mowing there, and we're going to use those to our benefit. There's some Pennsylvania sedge, some native Pennsylvania sedge. There's some hair grass in there. There's some small cedars. Again, just typically stuff that's been mown, but if we let it go, it's going to come back and really add to that buffer, that maritime thicket that we're trying to create
and that corridor along those two properties. That being said, there are some trees that need to come down in order to access for the dock and pier. We're going to be putting trees back in the general vicinity. Rather than just pitch pine, we're going to be doing red oak, black gum, and eastern red cedar. The shrub understory is going to be a little more diverse. There is an existing lower shrub understory that's kind of mixed in with what I call the requisite exotic invasive plant material, bittersweet, porcelain vine, honeysuckle, and I think even some autumn olive is in there. We're going to manage that. We're going to take that out. We're going to enhance that. Some of the nuisance plant material, the catbrier and the poison ivy, we will be addressing that as well. In those areas, we're going to be replanting bayberry, beech plum, and groundsel bush, and then coming more landward, the more upland species, the viburnum, high bush blueberry, and actually some spice bush, some lindera. Ground covers will be consistent with what, as you're looking at the water, is somewhat consistent with what's to the left or to the north. We're going to be doing some transitional plant material, some huckleberries, some sweet fern, again, some Pennsylvania sedge, and some bearberry as well. The idea would be to manage this area, again, as a maritime thicket. On the number 9, we're going to be removing some additional lawn, probably about 4 feet, running up to the property line, and then again replanting that with native plant material, native ground cover, both seed and plug. All of this plant material will be managed and maintained through the terms of the order of conditions, and then afterwards as well, just to make sure that it's successful. I'm certainly open to questions, comments, criticisms. Look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Amy,
Maybe we can continue a little bit more, please, if that's all right.
please.
And then just some mitigation points. Again, this project, as Lindsay presented, which is very well thought through mitigation plan, is really above and beyond what's required for the areas impacted. For work within resource areas, according to the Harwich wetland regulations, a 4-to-1 mitigation ratio is required. Clients have decided to go up and beyond that, and they're actually proposing about a 10-to-1 mitigation ratio, and that's a combination of both upland, well, not really upland, just the plantings that Lindsay went over, as well as some shellfish bags down by the salt marsh. So it's a combination of mitigation that exceeds, again, the regulations by almost double what the regulations require, more than double what the regulations require, and it's more than a 10-to-1 ratio. I'm going to stop sharing now, and then I'll continue with some of our other points we'd like to bring to the commission tonight. Last hearing, we did not, I think we received a DMF letter, however, we did not have sufficient time to respond to it. So now, since we've had the time to respond to it and highlight some of DMF's concerns, I'd like to please present those tonight. A couple comments, and this was also, I'm reading from a response letter that Coastal Engineering provided to the commission as part of our supplemental information packet. I'm starting with the Division of Marine Fisheries section. One of the comments that they had was that the piles will displace the current shellfish habitat, as shown on the state maps. More specifically, and then our response is that more specifically to this project site, we've done a shellfish study, which has indicated that generally, there's noxious oils, and it's really not suitable for shellfish. And we can go into that further if we want to. But that was a study that was done for this project site. Second, the comment from the DMF was regarding to the materials. We're proposing to have compatible materials with the environmental recommendations for small docks and floats publication that DMF put together. And the Herring River is a well-flushed area, and our materials are compatible with an environment like that, and also has it's durable. Second, the commission informed Coastal that the DMF recommends float stops in lieu of dredging. However, due to Harwich regulations, this area requires dredging to meet the water depths and not extend any further out than absolutely required to stay away from the existing salt marsh and maintain a 25-foot buffer to that. Third, the float area should be minimized. We believe that this project largely accomplishes that by really just being a shared dock between two properties. There could essentially be double the dock space within the two project sites if the owners were not to do a shared dock scenario. So we believe that this proposal really hammers down on trying to minimize the amount of surface area within the salt marsh. Additionally, measures consistent with other projects within Harwich have been taken. For instance, the monopile design within areas that have salt marsh, which is shown to be sufficient at allowing salt marsh to grow without impact to the salt marsh below. There's also the minimum deck board spacing will be provided among the other things that are regulated within the town's bylaws. Next, I'd please like to go to the individual commissioners' comments from last week. The last hearing. The first is regarding to work on the coastal bank. The project does have work on the coastal bank. However, it's materials that are compatible with the coastal bank's function of whether it's providing sediment source, which really doesn't happen at this project site, or protect from storm damage. The elements on the coastal bank are diamond piers and some piles. So those are deep foundation elements, very low displaced area, and it's not anything that would prevent the coastal bank from performing its duty in some term. Then the docks, and there was a comment that the docks on the west side of Route 28, where this project's located, have traditionally had more impact to the salt marsh. Coastal Engineers performed a study to this regard along the whole Herring River between the 28 Bridge and I believe it's Lower County Road. This was presented to the Select Board as part of the potential moratorium for docks, and during that study we found that the implementation of monopiles among the deck board spacing has really shown that there's little to no impact to the salt marsh with these structures. And in fact, looking at historic images from the 1930s to today, where there was initially 5 docks and now there's more than 20, has really shown that the salt marsh has been stable over time, even with these new structures. So locally, the salt marsh is protected by using the monopile design and elevating and using the deck board spacing. It's also important to note that the dock is spanning east to west generally, which is a recommended design instead of north to south, because that would have more shading effects from the sun going throughout the day. Next comment was regarding the pier's location as currently proposed, with a little bit more south than an area that's already disturbed by a natural freshwater spring. In previous additional materials submittal we provided to the commission, we went into the weeds of why the project is proposed in its current location. There's really 2 aspects to that. One is the regulations of the Waterways Commission. The Waterways Commission, we did initially approve a pier in that area that is already disturbed by the freshwater spring, and the Waterways Commission found that proposed pier would be a navigational hazard because it's coming around a bend, and they ultimately denied our initial application. So this was our second choice, but it is also better for the wetlands regulations because it requires about a half of a variance for the dock length compared to the other location. So it's more compliant, we believe, with the the Harwich Wetland Protection Regulations for the salt marsh and the variance required for the length past mean high water. Next question was regarding the 25-foot buffer to the salt marsh for the dredging. I believe Amy pointed this out in the last meeting that according to the 401 water quality certification, that's really applicable to dredging that exceeds 100 cubic yards. However, nonetheless, the 25-foot buffer to the salt marsh is being implemented in this project to protect the salt marsh. We're going to vast extents by proposing shared dock, a monopile design, and all the other reasons why we're protecting the marsh, and this is another reason, another way why we're protecting the marsh, to use a 20-foot buffer, even though it's not specifically required by the state. It would be required likely from other regulations and is beneficial to the salt marsh. I believe that was it from the questions we had from the last hearing to respond to. Michelle or Dawn or Paula, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Not right now. If commissioners have any questions, happy to answer any.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add either, Cole, thanks. Okay, so if you are done with your initial presentation, then Amy, do you have comments?
Yes, thank you. So, in regards to the mitigation, since we have you sitting here right up in front of us, I like the mitigation plan, but it is really hard for me to tell exactly where the mitigation is going, because on the mitigation plan, you don't show, you've basically taken a rendering and superimposed it on a portion of the plan, but on the plan, you don't show the bank, the marsh, the edge of existing vegetation, etc. I feel like I do know where it is, but again, I can't correlate it exactly, because you show, the channel and the water, but you don't show landward of that how it directly correlates. So it's a little bit hard for me to tell definitively where it's going. And traditionally, mitigation plans do have it kind of more directly overlaid on the survey. So I understand you saying you're over your required mitigation amount. I'm not sure you technically factored in the square footage of the float into your proposed structure. I know it's seasonal and it's technically sitting on top of the water, but you do count things such as the decking for the dock and pier, and I think it is consistent that we have a consistently required also mitigation for all the structure, including the float there. So I didn't see that directly called out. I love seeing a joint dock proposal, and so I like creative projects like that. But you are asking for a very large variance, 32-foot long variance. And to my knowledge, based on my background here for the past 12 years, I have not pulled out the plans and the specific files for all the docks that we've looked at. But based on just my recollection, the only dock that we've allowed a length variance for, I believe, is the Maher dock, which is directly north of the town pier at Witchmere Harbor. And that was a 10 to 15 foot long variance, and that was only because we actually had denied the project, but it was prior to my coming here. It was denied for really no reason. It was denied without prejudice, and during litigation, council really had said you probably should should settle and give them a length variance, because it's gonna be very difficult to win otherwise, because you denied without prejudice. So really only during litigation have we granted a length variance, and that was even less than half the length that you're requesting here. Let's see. Give me 1 second. I won't rehash the comments from the Division of Marine Fisheries. I did include those comments for the commission in my site summary, so they have them there, as well as in the actual letter that we did receive. Just reiterate, but I will reiterate, they have detailed that it is within mapped habitat for a variety of species, such as winter flounder, bay scallop, oyster, quahog, alewife, blueback herring, American eel, white perch. And they offered a lot of suggestions. So at this time, I don't have a positive motion to move this project forward.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Comments from commissioners, starting with Sophia.
I feel like I'm gonna have to abstain. I don't really know. I think it's a positive that it's 2 properties with 1 dock. I think it's a really thoughtful planting plan. I don't know a lot of this, so I kind of have to go off of Amy's lead and her experience. But I feel like I need to sit back and listen and learn a little bit more before I.
Thank you. Brad?
Sure. So at the last hearing, I did not voice support for this project, and in my opinion, has not changed. I think this is a very big challenge to try to find a way to permit this dock at this location. To follow up on Amy's point, on the distance, there are 4 meanders in the Herring River between Route 28 and Lowell County Road. At each meander, at the midpoint, there's extensive salt marsh that extends out towards the river, and there are no docks at those points, at those 4 locations. And I think there's a good reason for that, because of the distance and the fact structures have to interact with salt marsh over that long distance. So this is the 4th meander down close to the Lowell County Road. It's a difficult location, I think, to permit. I think past commissions have felt that way about these locations. So my concern is the 2 variances, distance, salt marsh. Probably the biggest one is impact to salt marsh, and but also I remain concerned about impacts to coastal banks. I think we can get over that. We often do with dock and pier projects, but I do see impacts there, and it is a marginally acceptable project in my opinion, so that's additional impacts. The coastal bank will be impacted by the structure. And what we often see in the Herring River is folks get their dock put in, and then you see encroachment on that coastal bank. It's not allowed, it just happens. So I remain concerned about that. The 5th issue that is difficult to overcome to me is the dredging recommendation. Prior to going from 2.5 feet requirement at mean low water to 3 feet, this commission did require variances to excuse that if the 2.5 feet depth at mean low water was not available. My interpretation of that language presently is that it should need a variance. We've heard that it doesn't. I think that's okay. It's a disagreement. You still have habitat that presently doesn't provide the depth. And so what I did this past week, and I went out, I looked at the site, I dug for clams, I reviewed the shellfish survey again, and what I found was the survey was fairly accurate. It was a very different design that we haven't seen before. There's 10 transects that are 25 feet apart, and there's 3 by 3 foot plots that are 15 feet separated along each transect. And so there's a maximum of 111 plots over those 10 transects, but only 69 were actually dug. The rest were in the salt marsh. And among those, there's less than 10 that are in the footprint of the dredging window. And we've heard from the last hearing there were no shellfish found, but in fact there were shellfish found. And I found quahogs when I went out and dug in that footprint. So I don't think the survey really represents that well, that habitat. They also only found 9 oysters over 20 potential plots that would have had oysters. And there are so many oysters at this location. Oysters are not as impacted by these type of structures as soft shell clams or quahogs, But I think if those numbers reflected what's there, you might see much bigger numbers, and we often go by shellfish densities. So the other thing I found on site was the sediments transition from peat at the mean low water mark to coarse sand, mucky sand, and then to softer sand. And where that peat transitions, I found quahogs right there, right where the float is supposed to be. So to me, it's not really a question of whether they're there. They're certainly present, and we don't allow new structures in shellfish habitat. So to me, I can't get over allowing a variance for that location. We also heard that the sediments were anoxic. They're not anoxic. They may be seasonally hypoxic. They're quite coarse as you go deeper. When you get to -3 feet of mean low water, I couldn't dig deeper. This project used a bull rake in February to sample the deeper sections. They found few. Those sediments might be seasonally hypoxic. I don't know. I couldn't sample those. But where the float is, where the dredging footprint is, those potentially seasonally hypoxic, but they have quahogs existing right now. So to me, it's not a project to issue a variance for either the distance or the shellfish habitat. It's also not a project to approve given impacts to salt marsh with all this structure over that distance of the salt marsh. So I remain concerned about just the ability to permit this project, and I don't support it.
Thank you, Brad.
I have no further comments, sir.
Mark?
I have no comments.
Okay, so my only comment is that this is mapped shellfish habitat, which there would have to be a variance in order to build there, but there has been no request for a variance. I brought this up at the last hearing on this, and I thought I heard an acknowledgement that that was the case, but it hasn't been addressed in any of these other minutes. There's been no request for a variance. I agree with Brad. I would not support variance if it was requested here. So I'm not sure what the basis is for proceeding, since you're proposing to build in mapped shellfish habitat. I don't support it. So, it doesn't appear to me that commissioners have further comments.
Sorry,
Yes?
I'm not a
please.
commissioner. They do request a waiver for being in map shellfish. It's in the original notice of intent
Oh, it is?
application. It's a section, sorry. It's waiver request pursuant to section 1.103B8, and where they do detail that it is within map shellfish habitat, and they're requesting a waiver from that. So,
Okay.
just to
All right.
clarify,
Well-
it's not in the more recent documents, but it's in the original.
Okay. All right, well, that doesn't change my point of view, even
That's
with
okay, I
the
just wanted
request,
to
I still have
note it.
that opinion. Since I don't hear any further comments from the representatives of the applicants, I would.
Attorney Hutton has
We-
her hand up.
Okay,
We-
all right, okay.
Through the chair.
Good evening. Oh,
Great.
go ahead, Don. Do you want to go ahead?
No, you guys, we were just waiting for the commissioners to turn it back to us, so thank you.
Okay,
Good.
go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm Michelle Hunton from Rubin and Redmond. I'm here on behalf of the applicants. I just wanted to address a couple of issues. The first was the comment related to the need for a variance for dredging. This issue has come up a couple of times in past projects, and I just wanted to kind of round back as to why it originally came up in a project. It was on 14 Mill Point Road for the Aninos. The prior regulations, before they were amended, contained language, and I'll just read part of it, that stated requiring the water depth to be 2.5 feet to be maintained, and it had in parentheses without dredging. And we had discussed whether this meant a variance was needed for the dredging to achieve the water depth or not. And in past discussions, the language in parentheses that said achieving the water depth without dredging was found to be left in while the commission was editing the prior regulations, it was language that was inadvertently left in. And in the Anino project, the commission agreed that that language was not meant to be in the regulations, and therefore when dredging was required to meet the water depth, a variance was not necessary. And so in your amended regulations, as you know, the water depth obviously increased to 3 feet, but that language regarding the requirement to meet the 3 feet water depth does not include without dredging. The commission took out that language that stated without dredging. So to me, that's even more of an argument than we had in the past. That makes it clear that a variance is not required for dredging. And the commission hasn't required it several times. Another recent project was the 64 Snow Inn Road project. So I think that was a clear issue that has been discussed in the past, and the commission did not require a variance. I also just wanted to reiterate, as Amy had said, we did submit a variance for the shellfish habitat, and as, again, the commission's revised regulations, even though structures are not technically allowed in a town mapped shellfish area, variances are allowed, and the new regulations actually specifically states that variances are allowed if there's no adverse impact to land containing shellfish resource area. And the commission has granted variances for shellfish in the Herring River numerous times. I know I don't want to have to go through all of them, but I can name about 3 or 4 projects in the past year where shellfish variances are granted. So this isn't an uncommon request. BSC, as you know, prepared a shellfish report, and this report complied with the requirements in the regulations. And I understand that some commissioners might have different opinions as to what might be out there, but the fact is that a scientific report was done in compliance with the regulations, and there's not another opposing official report that complies with the regulations that is being presented to object to the BSC report. So we do have a report that's in compliance with the regulations that demonstrates that the project will not adversely impact shellfish areas, and therefore the variance should be allowed. That's all I had to mention for now. Thank you.
Do you have further comments?
Yes, through the chair, it's Don Monroe, Coastal Engineering. Just want to highlight a couple of things. I know the plan isn't up on the screen, but if you can envision the end of the proposed project where the floats are and the ramp, and I want to make a distinction between dredging, which is not considered a structure by Chapter 91, by 401 Water Quality, nor in the 310 CMR Wetlands Protection Act. It's specifically not a structure based on Chapter 91 licensing. It is classically called not a structure. So I want to make sure that when we're looking at a project like this, that we separate, quote, structure, which would be the 6 piles that are being proposed in the dredge footprint, and that the dredge footprint is non-structural in nature. So the non-structural portion of the project will not adversely affect shellfish habitat, nor will it adversely affect land under the ocean, because there are myriads of studies that the Army Corps has put out that demonstrate that removing not so suitable material, there still may be shellfish, those shellfish can be removed from the site before dredging, then they can be replaced in the same site or in a different site, but that the actual dredging site, proof positive, is in the Allen Harbor Dredge Project, as well as the Oyster Creek Project, that the shellfish have actually recover well in dredged areas, especially if there's already shellfish in the area adjacent to, and removing the material that's not as suitable as what's underneath would make the habitat better. So that separates the structural component from the non-structural component, where the dredging will not adversely affect the habitat, it'll actually enhance. Number 2, looking at the structural component of the project, we're talking about 6 piles that are 12-inch diameter, which are approximately maybe 6 to 8 square feet of area that we would be potentially displacing shellfish. And in many other instances, we can remove the shellfish from where the piles are being placed. And we've demonstrated through that report that Cole referenced, there are many photographs that the commission should look at that show that the piles that we would be placing, like piles along the Herring River, actually allow oysters and mussels to attach. So we feel that is adding habitat vertically in the location of those piles to supplement or replace the footprint that the piles will be taking up in that same area. So it may not address the quahog issue, but I believe that because it's a minimal amount of area that we're taking up, that there's plenty of area left in a more suitable habitat after the dredging is done for quahogs to be either seeded in this area and increase the possibility of more quahogs showing up as a result of the removal of the material that, quote, may not be anoxic, could possibly be hypoxic, but there's no question based on the coring that we did, and we had a laboratory report that we submitted to you folks. There are heavy metals and there are materials that are, quote, considered contaminants that we would be removing based on the dredging that are not suitable for really shellfish to really be harvested. I believe the shellfish would still properly live and act as filter feeders. So I think we'd be doing this area a favor by dredging it, seeding it, and allowing shellfish to grow, but I wouldn't, in my own mind, encourage shellfishing to be done in this location for consumption because of the heavy metal nature of the sediment that has nothing to do with this project, but has to do with just a natural occurrence due to boating and due to man's activity in this location. So we're offering to clean up an area that I believe it may have shellfish, but isn't really as suitable as it could be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have further comments from the commission? If not, is there anyone in the public here who would like to, who has something to say? Okay.
Quick follow-up, if I may. We have heard references to 2 studies that, the first was on the Herring River Dock and environmental stability from March 5th, 2022. The study really uses Google Earth satellite images to show salt marsh conditions. It doesn't demonstrate anything in terms of salt marsh changes. It lacks any fine scale on the ground analyses or measurements. So to me, it's not appropriate to have it stated this demonstrates there has been impacts to salt marsh. So I think that's important. Secondly, I'm not aware of a Wichita Harbor study that talks about shellfish before and after dredging. The commission hasn't seen that. If it's available, please provide it, but I haven't seen such a study. As far as I know, that hasn't been evaluated. I think those were the 2 points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Okay.
Ed?
Further comments?
Through the chair.
Yes, sir.
At this stage, it sounds like there's one item that needs to be addressed, and that would be Amy's raising the issue about the planting plan not being shown in a more concise way on the site plan. And I recall that when we did the Anino project, we actually plotted on our site plan, not in hand format, but plotted on our plan the locations of the planting scheme that Lindsay Strode proposed for that project. So I think we would like to be able to at least produce that plan, so it's in the record for the commission to review, and so that Amy will have something that she can put a better handle on that shows those exact plant locations that show on Lindsay's hand plan that's got our base underneath it. I think that would be appropriate.
I take that as a request for a continuance?
I think that's one item that is needed as a continuance, because your own agent has indicated that she is not comfortable, but she's not sure of where all the plants are going based on what we've submitted. So, yes, I think we would need to at least provide her that, and we would need a continuation to provide that, because we can't produce it right at this, right on the spot.
So my take on that is that that is something that would need to be resolved if there was solid support on the commission to go forward with this project. I personally don't doubt that you could come up with an acceptable planting plan in an acceptable form. I don't think that's really the issue here. The issue
I'd
really-
also like to propose, through the chair, may I please add some comments?
Go ahead.
I'd also please like to propose that there's options here to reduce the variance length, and then reduce the impact within the land containing shellfish by proposing alternative anchors for the pile, for the floats, to support, that would be less impactful. I think we can reduce this variance length by moving closer to the salt marsh, and because it's not a required regulation within the state or local bylaw. And if that's a reason why we can't be granted a variance because we're trying to meet an above and beyond regulation, then I think that's a chance for us to make this project more permittable through the town's regulations.
Wouldn't that require more dredging? You're right
No,
up
it would
almost
require
to the
this
limit here, right?
similar amount of dredging, just closer. Right now, we're holding a 25-foot additional buffer above and beyond any required regulation, and that's adding to the variance request by 25 feet.
I'm sorry, I missed that point.
So within the proposed dredging is under 100 cubic yards. And because of that, we're not required to meet state regulations, having a distance away from the salt marsh of 25 feet. We could move the dredge footprint closer to the salt marsh, maintain a dredging amount under 100 feet, and meet all regulations, and reduce the variance request. However, the currently proposed pier is trying to factor in additional protection for the salt marsh above and beyond any regulation.
Through the chair, I'm not sure why the chair is having a difficult time allowing us to provide the commission and ask for a continuation, where in the past you've certainly been gracious enough to do that when we have to provide additional information, which is, basically been requested by your agent. So I'm not sure I understand the hesitation here.
I'm just trying to clarify.
Is there something
what-
else going on that we should know about?
I'm trying to
come
clarify
on.
what the issues are and whether
Well,
there's,
we know that. That's why we're providing you with this information. Paul just made a great point. If your agent in the last meeting said that there's no regulatory requirement for us to hold 25 feet from the salt marsh, but we've kept it at 25 feet because we felt it would be better for the environment to have a little bit bigger dredge footprint to get rid of material. But if we're proposing in this meeting right now to reduce that based on input from the agent in the last meeting and based on the input from the agent today, provided with a more concise location of mitigation, then we should be allowed to do that.
Okay.
If I may.
go ahead, Amy.
Thank you. I would appreciate if applicants didn't reiterate in their terms what I said at a previous meeting. I do recall stating that there's no regulatory requirement if you're under 100 cubic yards dredging to be at least 25 feet from a salt marsh. That is true. But I also believe that I had stated that it is good practice to do so to protect the edge of salt marsh, and it's been past practice to do so. So it just kind of made it sound like that I was okay if you were less than 25 feet, and I can't say that right now because I don't know how much less you're going. I don't know what slopes and everything else, so please do not put words into my mouth. And
Stand correct. Thank you.
thank you. And my comment on the plan is not the direct exact plant locations, it's just that we don't have a reference point on the plan to where they stand in relation to top of coastal bank, salt marsh, etc. It's not, that should be on there at minimum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I just want to say that it's still very unclear to me. The proposal was just made that you could move the dock in by some amount, reduce the length of the variance that you're requesting by moving it closer to the salt marsh. And my question, which was answered, but I did not understand the answer, is wouldn't that require more dredging? If you're moving further landward, you've got to have a bigger dredge footprint. How is that not the case?
The project would have to be maintained under 100 cubic yards, whatever that means for the footprint of the dredge area. It could be done. I mean, the reason why the dredge footprint is far out is because we're holding the 25-foot buffer. The relative grades are not as steep, and then a 3-to-1 slope is what's being proposed currently by the dredge footprint, and that could be kind of brought back closer to the salt marsh to reduce the variance request. And additionally, if there's concerns about the impacts to the land containing shellfish, we could potentially change the support for the floats to an alternative option that we could present to the commission that we've used on other projects. So two reasons there.
Okay. Mark?
I'd move for continuance to give the applicant the opportunity to make any adjustments to represent.
Do we have a second?
To what date? The next meeting is December 20th. We would need new information a week from today. The meeting after that is January 3rd. And let me check my calendar. And we would need information by December 27th. What's the purview of the applicant?
Let's please go with the sooner date, Amy.
Okay, so that would be December 20th, and we would need any additional documentation you intend to present by 4 o'clock on the 13th.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's
Thank you.
5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, next on the agenda is a request for an extension to an order of conditions for 99 Riverside Drive, map 4, parcel A3-A1 SE 32-2355. Yes,
Hi,
hi.
good evening. Shane Watson with Bedworks Design, representing Jeff Lang and Sandra Wyckoff for 99 Riverside Drive. Thank you for your time. I know it's getting late here. Hopefully this won't be so complicated. We requested an extension 2 years ago. Amy and I met a few weeks back, hopefully to talk about certificate of compliance at that time, for this meeting. And we both agreed, it was brought to light that in the original notice of intent, there was nothing put in there about future management of the bank, of any of the areas. And that's a real miss due to the extensive planting and restoration that has happened in that area. It's a large area. There's slope issues. The amount of plants that we've installed is extensive. So there will be a need for ongoing management, pruning, mulching, dividing, possibly removal of things as they get out of control, and continued invasive management. So we will need to go for an amendment to request that from the board. So we're here simply today to request a year extension, so we can apply for that amendment, because there was nothing in the original order of conditions. BSC did that originally. There was nothing in there about future management. It was all about the now. Everything's planted. It looks beautiful. It's a real success from my perspective. We've had 2 full growing seasons for everything. The amount of plant material that's been put in is vast, and yeah, it's beautiful. Looks great. The slope is holding on all areas. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, really pleased with the project. And unfortunately, this is a little bit of a mess, so we request a 1-year extension so that we can put in that amendment to describe fully what we need for, to go forward. So my client has the ability to manage his property properly forever.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
Yes, it did come to light that when we did the site visit, that there was not any ongoing conditions regarding maintenance of things. And because this permit is due to expire imminently or potentially, actually already technically did, but because they got the extension request in before the expiration date, it carries on, so we can have this discussion. To me, it made sense to allow them a 1-year, 1, to have further establishment of the plants, and 2, also for them to pursue going for an amendment for future maintenance, which was not in the permit. So rather than have them close this out and have them file a whole new permit application for work that's completely related to this project, it just seemed to keep it all neat and tidy all together, give them a year extension so they can come back and approach you with their ideas for ongoing management of the bank and buffer.
Okay, thank you. Do you have comments? Mark,
Seems reasonable to me.
No comment.
Jim, Brad? Seems reasonable to me. Do we have a motion?
Sure. I'll move that we close the public hearing and grant the extension of the order of conditions for 99 Riverside Drive, map 4, parcel A3-A1, FE32-2355.
Second?
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Amy.
Sorry you had to wait a little while.
Oh, no problem.
This isn't even that late for us, so.
Oh, really? Wait for me.
Okay.
All right.
Next, we have a request for a certificate of compliance for 25 Gray Neck Lane, map 11, parcel X8-632. Assume that means SE 32-2386.
Yeah,
Do we have,
I have a question. Sorry.
yes, sir.
I've just,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious if Commissioner Hall truly is present online, because if they are, then we have to add you to, the minutes and the, okay.
I guess not.
Supposed to be on vacation.
He is now.
Sounds like a fun vacation.
I'm probably gonna get a text in a minute. Anyways, okay, so I'll take that as, we still only have 5. It was for an addition and raise and replace in a shed repair. The conditions on site are not exactly as we permitted, but I do think we can issue a cert of compliance. The shed is a bit larger than we agreed, and there is a rinse station attached to it. There was a rinse station before, but it was on the deck next to the house. There's also a bulkhead access to the basement that was not on the approved plan, which may have just been an oversight. I think it's something that we would have allowed. They did some planting along, though they didn't have to. And I think that had they come forward with these deviations, we would have approved them initially. All of them are greater than 50 feet from the wetland, and I think it meets the intent of the permit. So I would recommend a certificate of compliance for it, with the as-built plan now being the plan of record.
Okay. Questions?
Not for me.
No.
Okay.
I'll move to release a certificate of compliance. Okay, for that project.
Second?
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 5-0. Now we have 2 sets of minutes. Comments, if people had a chance to review the minutes.
Let's do November 15th first.
I have no comments.
Those were in your Dropbox for a while, so we didn't make paper copies.
I had no comments on the minutes.
Okay.
I'll be back.
He said he has no comments on the minutes.
Are
I
we
have
all-
no comment.
I'm fine with the first.
Yeah, if you want to take a minute for the second, because they are pretty new, but we wanted to try to get them done.
Yeah.
We can do it one at a time.
I sent my comments.
We got it.
They were little things.
Well, you called me a mister, so.
Yeah, I know. I was
she-
just trying to get you back.
We called you a Ms.
You mean you listened to Ernie and read them ahead of time? Remember that? He was always honest to read them ahead of time.
I have always tried to do that.
I know, it is the right way to go.
It's painful. I gotta admit, it's painful.
We get to relive our meetings.
Well, actually, I really like that you're almost always getting last meeting's minutes, because it's really helpful to
That is
read
our
the minutes
priority, is,
Or read the minutes of the last meeting, because there's a lot of
yeah.
continuing business. And it works a lot better if you sort of refresh your memory about what exactly happened.
Our goal is to have the most recent meetings minutes done for the next meeting, and then ideally an additional set to help start catching us up.
Yep, that's good.
So Kalia has been doing great with that.
Yeah. She has a smile on her face when she's talking, which is it's a great sign.
I was just looking for edits and, grammar and things, and
Yeah.
I can't remember the content.
Yeah, right, well, okay.
You can do both simultaneously if you want, if you have no edits.
All right.
Okay, I'll move that we approve the minutes of the meeting for the following meetings. First one would be November 15th, 2023, and the second would be March 1st, 2023.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, so now we're on to discussion and possible votes, updates to community garden rules and regulations. Let's do that first.
Okay, so the Conservation Commission has current custody of a 6-acre plus or minus piece of land on Sisson Road, which is a community gardens. The community gardens is roughly 90 some odd roughly 20 by 20 foot size spots, as well as 6 raised bed, smaller gardens. So there's roughly about 1,000 plots in the community gardens. And it's been a while. We need to revamp the regulations. And what has become apparent over the past couple of years is the desire for many of the gardeners to have what we call perennial plots, meaning plots where they can keep their fencing up year-round, and we wouldn't till the plots for them. So now if you drive into the community gardens on your left-hand side, those are 20-ish of what we have as current perennial plots. People can keep their fence up, they can grow some perennial crops if they want to, but the remainder of the spots is on the right, and then as you go farther down on the left, those are what we call annual plots, where we do require people to remove their fencing and remove everything by December 1st every year. And we do that because historically people have wanted their plots to be, more people than not have wanted their plots to be tilled by the town, which costs us between $400 and $500 most years to do that. Over the past few years, more and more people have voiced that they would rather not have that done and would rather leave their fencing up. So we sent out a poll email poll to the existing gardeners, and we let them know a few times about it. We only did get about 30 some odd responses, but the vast majority of those wanted perennial plots. So they didn't care if we tilled, they just wanted to be able to keep things there year round. So one, that's the change that we're recommending that we make. And just a little bit more clarification, especially as it would pertain to having a permanent plot. You know, you can leave your fences and stuff and obviously perennial plants, but things that you don't want damaged during the winter or potentially stolen, those are things like stakes, bird baths, furniture. A lot of people have chairs down there. Those things should all be removed, as well as any trash, broken materials. Fencing is to remain in good condition. Question did come up about trees. A couple of people who have perennial plots are wanting to plant fruit trees in their plots. And I like the idea, but I do think it could be potentially problematic. The plots are only 20 by 20, so if you get a tree that's there for a few years, you could potentially eventually shade out your adjacent plot person. And also, if you were to abandon your plot after a few years, it would be a lot more work for us to have to potentially remove that than say, I mean, I already have to remove raspberry bushes, and that's a pain in the neck, so I'd rather not have to remove apple trees and things like that as well. Solution to that potentially could be that we find another location in the gardens to have, if people wanted to start a little grove of fruit trees, but have it be separate from the actual plots themselves. So if there's a real need for that, I think we have room to accommodate that elsewhere. But yeah, we drafted some new changes. The new changes, hopefully you see, are in yellow. And would love your vote of support on them. We've formulated these with the input of people who have been seasoned gardeners there for a long time.
So, one question that I have is, it's my impression that people who currently have perennial plots
Mhm.
have raised beds.
Mhm.
And this doesn't mention raised beds,
Right.
so what,
They
is that
could.
intentional, or?
It is intentional. We left that out. Our feeling is that whatever the current people who have perennial plots have been allowed to do, such as raised beds,
I see.
that it would be only fair for the new people to be allowed to do so as well.
Do you have anything where or have you considered something like a security deposit where if someone doesn't clear their lot by December 1st or someone leaves you a big raspberry bush, where it's like there's some guarantee or help for you at least?
I hadn't considered that, because we only do charge $40 per plot per year, it's so minimal.
Yeah.
It's a good idea. I'm not sure how we would, so we don't set the fees here, the selectmen would have to agree to any change in fee or assessment of a deposit like that. So if we wanted to look at that, we can. It is a bit of work, let me tell you, I think either way, if we keep it the same or if we change it, it's still a fair amount of legwork for us to do, which normally we don't mind doing.
Yeah.
But so our recourse, just so you know, thus far is if people leave their plots in bad condition, then we don't renew them. We have a list of people we will not give plots to, because they haven't treated them correctly. So that's kind of the recourse we've done. 'Cause it does stay in there that, if you don't maintain your plot, it will be reassigned, which is what we've done.
I just wonder with the more like perennial things, if you're starting to invite a little bit more risk of work for you.
True.
Maybe, did we bump the fee up a few years ago? I forget, I thought we talked about it.
Actually, I think we did. I think it was several years ago. It was 30, and I think we went up to 40. It's roughly breaks even now, which was the goal. We didn't want it to, it's not gonna be a moneymaker for the town, but we also didn't want it to be a sink.
Yeah.
So if I looked at other towns' fees, and I found us to be right around even, or actually a little high, believe it or not. But we also, we used to till, which was a thing that a lot of towns don't do. And our plots are bigger than some of the
Provide water,
others.
right?
Hmm?
Provide water as well?
We do, but most of them do.
Yeah.
Provide water. So where we were different is 20 by 20 is a pretty big garden.
Yeah.
I did one on my own one year, and it's a lot for one person to do. So they're bigger than some towns.
I
If
think
you-
40 is a good number.
Yeah.
I'm not advocating going higher.
Yeah. Try to keep it, again, so it's a wash. It's not losing money, but it's not a profit, It's just a nice thing that we have for the community.
I would agree with Brad on the holding the fee as it is. To Sophia's point about looking for surety, I mean, I understand the reasoning for it, but I wouldn't feel right asking townspeople to put up surety
Mm-hmm.
to the fact that they're gonna come back and clean up the plot. What you do right now with having a list of people that abuse the privilege, okay, that makes sense. But to ask people to put money up, I don't
Yeah.
see that being necessary.
I mean, we're gonna call you 5 times and harass you to clean your plot before we go out there and do it
Exactly.
ourselves.
Right. I mean,
You
that's,
Usually-
be on that list.
Nobody wants a call
Yeah.
5 times from us.
right, just, who wants to do that?
But yet, about 3 to 5 people every year probably do.
Couple of things. We had discussed at one point reaching out to the water department about the water bill.
Mhm.
Was there ever any success with that?
That is really not so much to deal with the water department as it would be a conversation with the select board as to who pays that. The water department it's our care and custody of that land, so that's who they bill it to. They don't really have a say, from what I understand, in that. It's really the select board. Just so you are aware, I had intended to do it for this year, but we did not get to it. Now that we have more adequate staffing, my intention is to go for a well for CPC next year, which will be an initial cost, but hopefully a long-term savings. But we can definitely have that conversation going forward with the select board about who should be paying that water bill.
Right, well,
Because the fees that we assess, that we collect, don't go into ours, they go into the general fund.
exactly.
So we
That's-
don't, right,
That's what I was getting back to, was,
yep,
we're gonna,
we don't see that money.
okay. Well, We
but
don't
yet
see
we
it,
have
we
to,
shouldn't give it away
we
either.
have to
so.
pay it. So it's, it is 40% of my overall expense budget is just water, which we have no control over. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One other question. Most of the perennial plots are to the south as you drive in
Yep.
the gardens, right? How close are they to that wetland body that's there?
They're within 100 feet. They've been there since, I don't know how long, so we're not expanding there. But, yeah.
Okay.
You wanna talk about fertilizer use?
No, I want to talk about structures within the,
Oh, those have always been fenced. They're not within 50. Some of the fencing might be within 100.
I personally don't see it making any difference.
Yeah.
But that same person's neighbor, we're making them follow the same rules.
I get it.
So,
Mhm.
fair is fair.
Well, 50 is the key. If they're inside 50, we should, think about it. If it's 50 to 100, that's quite common to be allowed.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
And they've been here long before I have. There's been plots there, so,
Pre-existing.
and fencing. So before the 50-foot no disturb, I would reckon. You have any changes or differing opinions?
No, it's good to me.
Our big problem is gardeners being present while watering. They set up sprinklers, which I don't like those sprinklers that do this because they just get all over the place and waste water. We at least say that you have to be there. One person a few years ago, it was a repeat offender of that, would go and be gone for 2 hours and leave the water on, and eventually we revoked the garden privilege for that person. So, that's our biggest problem.
That's expensive water.
I know. Love to see the select board, as Mark suggests, agree to pick up the water bill because we don't receive the funds.
Right.
Yeah,
If you ever had a chance, I don't know.
We can get on for a discussion at some point. I can talk with, I think Michael's our liaison now, and Julie's the chair, so,
Bounce it off and.
yeah. I don't know if they'll wanna do it, we're getting into warrant time, so if they'll wanna do it now, or maybe after mid to end of February, when the warrant's set. But, for something like this, so, but I'll ask.
Yeah.
There's no huge rush, but sometime this winter or spring would be good.
Did you say there was 1,000 plots down there, more or less?
100 plots.
100 plots, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I thought I heard 1,000 too.
Yeah, so just so you know, our water budget is about $4,000, and there are roughly 100 plots, 90 some odd which at $40 a pop. And we fill every year, then some people don't tend them, but we still collect the money. So it's roughly a wash,
If the money came to us.
if the money came to
Wash
us.
for the town,
it's a
except,
bonus for the town because they're not paying for the water. It's
Yeah.
a sink for you.
Right.
That's-
Even if you take the money out of one pocket, put it in the other one's still empty,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. That's the way to look at it.
All right.
yeah, okay.
Can
yeah.
I,
Need a vote on that?
a
item?
vote first, yeah, because it is your land, so you have the power for the regulations, so if you would adopt these revised regulations.
I move we vote to support and adopt the changes in the community garden regulations.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0, okay, so then we have, what?
We,
Oh,
yeah,
the proposal, it's a single proposal, right? For
Yeah.
a study at 47 North Road, or is there a new one?
no, I reached out to, 3 companies that I knew could do this service that we wanted, which was to evaluate the stability essentially of the structures and any potential threats to the resource areas around 47 North Road. And did a site visit with two, and ultimately we only got one proposal to assist in that, which is the BSC group proposal that you see in front of you. I don't think it's exactly what we're looking for, and so I've reached out to Mr. Smith to kind of see where he's at, because in terms of his planning for a new bulkhead, because this is just a proposal. Who know, like, by the time BSC or potentially could do some of the work, does it make sense to have it done at this point if Mr. Smith's gonna be back to us in a month or two with his own plan for rebuild? So I haven't heard, but I do know that in mid-November that they had their geotechnical borings done. They had a big rig out there and did the borings that they needed to do to determine sediment composition, compaction, everything, in order to redesign a structure that will work out there. So I haven't heard, but I don't, you have to excuse me, I read this quite a long time ago. So they're asking, it's about $7,000, which was more than I had anticipated a study being, and it's more than we wanted them to do. So I'm just curious if you wanted to discuss this or act on this, if you want to wait for me to hear where Mr. Smith is at. Of course, those are just words. Or what you want to do, if you wanted me to go back to the BSC group and remove some of the things that they've proposed that might be erroneous. Or no, so if you wanted to take a minute to review, you can.
So my reaction to this was, there are services we didn't ask for. At least what I was interested in was a risk assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Not a plan for how to fix the thing.
Right.
Because that's his responsibility.
Right.
I'm just concerned about being stuck with
Right.
with
I
a
know.
big problem there, and us not having adequately done what we can to address the risks associated with that. And they don't even address that here.
No.
So I wouldn't be in favor of just accepting this proposal myself.
I think they misunderstood for the most part what we were getting at, which I thought I had made clear. We didn't want options for what he could do or what he should do. It's a risk assessment. I feel like they kind of misunderstood that. Do you want me to go back with that clarification to them and see if they'll revise this?
If I could ask a question, Mr. Chair. So I think I missed the meeting probably when this was put forward. Is this a thing where our fund is gonna pay for that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wasn't there to advocate against that.
Well, I think I actually remember you advocating against it.
We talked about it, I think, twice, actually.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
I missed a couple meetings.
I brought it up once, and basically, everybody shook their heads in disbelief at the idea, including you. And then I brought it again at another meeting, and I was just concerned, and I don't know why people's minds change, but at that point.
Yep, well, I wasn't there, and I guess the vote
Yeah.
probably went forward, so that's fine. Philosophically, I guess I'm kind of opposed to us paying for this, but if the favor of the commission, that's fine. I would just say, the design, you're not asking for 2.2, the design of the bulkhead improvements.
No.
So if you could switch that for like a best professional opinion on what the design approach might be without asking them to design it.
I don't even know if we need that. It's,
Not even
Not
that.
even-
no, it's just really to determine, I think, trying to make sure that the town, because we know the problem exists,
Yeah.
that we're doing what we can to make sure that we're not held liable for any of this,
I don't know
should
why.
anything happen.
I don't think we would be.
I don't think we would either, but,
Well, I mean, going forward, you've already got one, supposedly got an engineer on board that's doing the design. I mean, that engineering should stand up to any legality going forward. There's going to be permits issued for the work. There's a series and a process that they have to go through to complete this. So to bring in another engineer, I mean, I understand the point of verification, of caution and protection, and I don't dispute that. However, I'm afraid that that may just be done in redundancy. I don't see the opportunity for any realistic gain.
So, I get it. What motivated me, well, I have 2 points. One, what motivated me is my continuing lack of faith in Mr. Smith actually following through on anything. He has real trouble. And, you know, if I thought in the next 3 or 4 months, he'd have a plan in place and contractors there fixing the problem, and there was a high likelihood of that, I might feel a little less concerned about this. But the question is, if he doesn't follow through, like he's had a problem doing for how many years now? Then we're stuck with this thing, and it's just higher probability that some, you know, bad storm is gonna happen, like what created this present problem, that will wash, you know, create a bigger problem, undermine the foundation or something. I don't know what the risk of that is. Maybe I'm just being overly cautious here, but that was my motivation. But I wanted to respond to your point, Brad, because I do believe in either bylaws or regulations, there is a provision for the Conservation Commission requiring third-party input to a decision that is paid for by the applicant. And again, that might not be a straightforward process with Mr. Smith, because nothing is proved to be straightforward with him. But nonetheless, the idea is that Mr. Smith is ultimately paying for this, and we're just trying to control the risk. And we have funds available to put the cash up front, but my position would be that the bill would end up on his desk. So I don't have that problem that you're talking about. But we're in this funny place right now that I'm not sure what the next thing to do is. I mean, you can just, if you can call whoever it is at BSC and just explain
Yeah.
that this isn't what we're asking for, you know, what about just a risk assessment? What's your opinion of what the risk in a worst-case weather event here, weather/title/whatever, are we at any risk? And, you know, they don't have to prepare big plans. They, you know,
can I tell you, I mean, for a side comment, that one of the engineers who didn't bid on that, put in a bid, said to me on site, because I told him, I said, we're looking to see, like, is this thing gonna make it through the winter? Given our historic track of what our winters, even the minorest winter could be. And he said, I can't tell you it's gonna stay.
oh, that's great.
He wouldn't.
Can't tell you it's gonna go either.
Can't tell us we're
Yeah.
gonna go, but he, right, exactly, but
He didn't-
I'm just saying that he had,
Chose not to bid either.
yeah,
Yeah, well, I can see how, right, those guys would be reluctant to actually, I mean, that may be the basic problem.
they may
None of
not
these
wanna stick
people-
their necks out on
They don't wanna
something
stick
like
their
this.
necks out, So it's sort of.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
but I just thought it was interesting. I think I need to find out more concretely where it stands, and I can contact Mr. Smith's engineer, and see what's been done and what the status is, what their projection is. and go from there, but I can ask them to do a I can ask them what the cost would be just for a risk assessment.
The other side of that, John, you know, if you go down the rabbit hole of assigning the charges for this to the applicant, it's been my experience to learn that you can charge anybody anything you want. The question is, how are you gonna collect it?
It's like fines, that's the problem with fines, and we're having that struggle with,
Well,
Yeah.
right.
They did protest at that one hearing I was at, that he felt it was a bit redundant, what we're already doing.
yeah,
So he did protest that, you know.
yeah.
Oh, and he's asked me afterwards, he's like, so, you guys are paying for this, right? And I said, well, that's what the commission voted.
Okay,
Going forward, I would say all the additional services are unnecessary. And
Yeah.
maybe add one to this first scope 1.0 on a risk assessment.
Yeah,
You know, evaluate conditions and options to stabilize the bulkhead, that could be done with a narrative. So
I don't think that's their job to do, I think that's his people's job to do.
It is, but if they could do it without an assessment, it could be like a
Yeah.
really low-cost professional opinion,
Yeah,
If he was-
professional opinion,
if he was willing to do that.
we'll see,
But the additional services, I don't see those applying at all here.
okay.
So, but the commission did vote to move this forward, right?
we did.
Okay.
Yep.
This is the result.
I was there, so.
Yeah, it's not, it didn't have a lot of interest. It's a low-cost thing, there wasn't a lot of interest to do it,
Okay,
and also kind of a contentious, controversial thing. Well, we don't have to act, I have some feedback from you. I'll try to continue to be in touch with the owner and his engineer, and I'll be back in touch with Dave Crispin from BSC to fine-tune it. All right?
so, do we have anything else?
I have a quick question. Are we allowed to discuss anything that's happened tonight now after the fact, or is it just constrained to when the people are here in order to
The
talk
executive
about-
session that we had?
No, like one of the projects.
So you shouldn't discuss it amongst yourselves. But in term, like, if you want to tell your significant other what happened at the meeting tonight, that's fine. But in terms of having a discussion about a topic, it's a slippery slope to breaking open meeting law.
Even though, like, could someone log in right now and, I don't know, what about meeting with you?
You can meet with me.
That's fine,
Mhm.
okay. All right, thank you.
I think you could ask a question on process, but to discuss the project in terms of
Right.
outcome, that would be.
Right, you can't discuss merits of a project.
Okay, understand.
Yeah.
So just a question, did you got the report from Solitude?
Yeah, but I haven't read it yet.
It's all right, I just, it's kind of pro forma, and there's another part that's,
Okay.
it's just a report on the Skinnicook treatment, which is done.
Mm-hmm.
It's done right, I didn't realize it was already done. Good.
John, is it a monitoring report, or just here's what the application report?
The monitoring report is to be delivered.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the application report that has been
Yep.
done,
Mhm.
which is,
Yeah, once we get the monitoring report, you'll see them.
Yeah.
If you want to see the other thing too, this one too, you
Dust
can.
off the Hinckley's report, because I don't recall ever seeing that, or if there's
Yeah.
even like a data file. I think reviewing the two at the same time would be helpful.
There was like a 1-year post one done, I believe, but then after that, I feel like it's been a little lacking.
Yeah.
So, sure, I can do that.
You know, when it's time to review the Skinnicook, I think it'd be instructive to look at that. Hinckley stayed kind of murky this year.
oh,
You
really?
notice that? And
Yeah.
it's interesting, post-Allen treatment. For example, Seymour was much clearer than Hinckley this year.
But it,
I wouldn't expect that.
we had no high readings though of toxic cyano at Hinckley.
Yeah, right.
So even it was cloudy, I mean, it gets tested either every week or every other week.
Yeah.
And So whatever it was that was making it cloudy could be a ton of other types of algae that are non-toxic, but
Yeah.
it was not anything of concern.
Yeah, I think these monitoring reports are really valuable. As an
Yeah.
aside, I got asked to comment on the Pilgrim Lake Orleans action in my capacity for the Division of Fisheries, and they really wanted me involved in that. There was a lot of lack of consensus. They're gonna go ahead with it. They voted to approve it, but there was really, a lot of process over deciding whether to do it or not.
What was the nature of the doubt? What was causing
The doubt was more the generic, putting chemicals in the water, what does it mean? Benthic habitat, how does it change? What about the organisms that can't get out of the way? Some of it was just generic fear of chemicals.
It's their
but
first one in Orleans too,
Yeah.
so it's
they
their
had a
first
big
step.
boom this year.
Yeah, they did.
Shut down the beach, it got very green, and they kind of freaked out.
Yep.
They really advanced the alum treatment quickly.
Yeah.
So it's not gonna be an issue that goes away for any town, I think.
Yeah.
I saw somebody, I think, talking about the Orleans project, being worried that it was just like temporary in the sense that it was like, it's like trapped at the bottom, period, and could like get reawakened, is that?
Those questions were
Yeah.
asked.
Yeah.
And it does sequester the phosphorus for quite a while.
There's a
but
shelf life.
There's a shelf life,
Yeah.
but new stuff is coming in. So it is truly kind of a temporary response.
Yep.
And you gain improvements in water quality for a certain number of years, depending on the application.
One of the
Wow.
assessments that happens when you're making a considered decision about whether to use alum is how much of the phosphorus in the water column is from immediate external inputs of one sort or another, and how much is just recycling the muck. And for a lot of ponds in the area have been collecting phosphorus-rich sediments for a long time. It's, way more than 50% of what's in the water column is just getting recycled out of the muck, and it's about the chemistry of low oxygen at the bottom of the pond and phosphorus getting released into the water column. And there are not a whole lot of options about how to address that. Capping it with, treating it with the alum treatment is one way to cap it, and which will last for a while. You could also consider dredging the thing, but I forget, I don't know how big Pilgrim Lake is, but you're talking about, probably acre feet of muck that would have to be sucked out of the thing, left to get dewatered,
Yeah.
and it's just, there aren't a lot of options.
Well, you went to that workshop on oxygen. and-
I spent a lot of time looking into this stuff.
Yeah, and I thought that workshop in Falmouth was very interesting.
Oh, that, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right, it is.
But at the same time, I think you've got, firms that are selling products, and so there's a lot of different types of information out there. You have to really evaluate what they're selling. And the oxygen systems, kind of, you plug them in, and you have to keep running them. You can run them seasonally, but you can't, once you stop running them, your anoxic conditions come back. And so alum might be one of the more feasible applications right now. And I can't tell you if it's great or not, but it's supported by DEP,
Bless
it's
you.
supported by other agencies. So it's probably worth trying, but don't stop trying to sewer as much as you can on the Cape.
Okay, do we have anything more?
I would move to adjourn.
And I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.